What's up guys, thanks for stopping by, hope you're doing good. Today's video is going to be all about Valheim. If you're like me, then you recently picked up this game, maybe you're just jumping in for the first time, or maybe you're a few hours in and you're just starting to venture out into the world and see what's what. Now, at first, just going out and spamming left click, bludgeoning people to death with your club will get you through some of the early stages and the easy enemies of the game, but pretty quickly it becomes clear that there's slightly more to the combat system than appears, and some small intricacies that once you know how they work, can greatly increase your effectiveness in battle. So for today's video, we're going to talk about 5 tips and tricks for combat in Valheim. Let's jump into it. Number 1 is parries and crits. Parries might actually be the single most important mechanic for combat that the game doesn't do a very good job of explaining. The way to parry is to right click for block just before the enemy actually hits you. If anyone has ever played Dark Souls that's watching this video, it works a similar way to that. Parrying always works better when you use these smaller round shields, the more buckler style, and when an enemy is parried, the game will make a sort of loud crashing / smashing sound that signifies the enemy is actually staggered. Whenever you hit an enemy that's staggered, you actually do a critical attack. However, sometimes enemies can be staggered just from regular attacks without parrying, but the same still applies. Once they are staggered, you attack, and that attack will be a critical one. So the way to fight is to wait, be patient, don't use stamina, wait for the enemy to attack. Just before they strike you, right click to block, then immediately start spamming left click to get those critical attacks in there. Then, if the enemy becomes staggered again from your sequence of attacks, make sure you get another hit in while they're staggered. This technique also works on ranged attacks such as bows or the rocks that Greydwarfs throw, but you do it the exact same way. Just before the projectile's about to hit, you right click. The only difference is you got to charge in and make sure you attack while the enemy's still staggered. Number 2 is that Greydwarfs are both afraid and weak to fire. So Greydwarfs are weak to fire, but they're also afraid of it. This means that when you see a Greydwarf, if you immediately equip a torch, they'll actually just start turning around in the other direction, start running away from you. It also means that torches are a really cheap and easy way to take care of a lot of Greydwarfs. If you change your torch and then hit a Greydwarf with it, it will set them on fire and they'll very quickly start taking damage. When Greydwarfs are in larger groups, they are still afraid of fire, so they will still run away from you, but they might start throwing some rocks, but it's still really safe to be in a pretty large group of Greydwarfs with a torch equipped. Hitting the Greydwarfs with your torch, however, will damage your torch a lot, and so using this technique, you will go through a lot of torches, but if you build just a few torches, you can take care of really large groups of Greydwarfs. You can kite them away a little bit, chase some of the stragglers on the edge, set them on fire, and the best strategy is really just to set one on fire, then move to another one and set him on fire. And to really make your torches go as far as possible, it's best to not really bother attacking with the torch whilst they're on fire. You could attack with a torch and then change to a club and attack with that, or just wait until the fire has gone out and just set them on fire again. Torches, of course, are not the only way to set Greydwarfs on fire. The larger Greydwarfs, like brutes and shamans, aren't afraid of torches, but they are still weak to fire, so you can still use your torch to set them on fire, or just craft a few fire arrows and set them on fire that way. The great thing about using torches in Greydwarfs, however, is that Greydwarfs also drop wood and resin. This means that even if you use up all your torches, as long as you kill a few Greydwarfs, you will have the materials to craft more torches. This strategy is a lot of fun, and for sure gets me out of a lot of otherwise sticky situations. Number 3 is fire arrows. So we did briefly touch on this in the last tip, but fire arrows are probably the single most effective weapon that you can use pretty much from the beginning of the game. They're really effective against Greydwarfs because they're weak to fire, and because you're using a bow, you can stay out the way of most attacks. The great thing about fire arrows is that even if the fire is only doing a little bit of damage, you're still doing a consistent amount of DPS in between each attack, and sometimes this can make all the difference. Fire arrows aren't just effective against Greydwarfs, however. So for enemies like trolls are an easy target for any player using fire arrows, as long as you're able to dodge some of the trolls' heavy attacks. And even some of the game's early bosses are made pretty easy with the use of fire arrows. Fire arrows are also really cheap to craft. It only costs 8 wood, 8 resin, and 2 feathers. You probably have a lot of wood anyway, and you have to kill a lot of Greydwarfs in this game, so you probably have a lot of resin too. And as for feathers, they're really common in chests, so if you're doing a lot of dungeons or opening a lot of chests in ruined huts, you can actually get a really consistent large amount of feathers over time. I don't recommend farming killing birds for feathers because it seems pretty inconsistent and it's pretty slow work. But if you just rush around, do a load of dungeons, loot every chest, go to every ruined shack you find, loot that chest, you'll end up with a ton of feathers in no time. And that, combined with the resin from Greydwarfs, means you're going to be able to have a really nice supply of fire arrows. And when all else fails, at least in the early game, those fire arrows are going to be how you succeed against some of the tougher enemies. They do, however, require workbench level 2 to craft, but it should just take most players a couple of hours at most to get workbench level 2. You just literally can't craft them as soon as you start the game, but very early in, you will be able to do this craft. Number 4 is that skeletons are weak to blunt attacks. Skeletons are one of the more common enemies in the game after Greydwarfs, and burial chambers are full of them. So considering that you really need to be looting a lot of burial chambers to progress through the game, it's really important to get good at fighting skeletons. The main blunt weapons in the game are the club and the mace, and both of them are actually really effective against skeletons. Even the club is surprisingly effective. After a few consistent hits with the club, a skeleton will get staggered and then you can follow up with a crit. And if using the mace, you'll easily be tearing through hordes of skeletons. Number 5 is secondary attacks. Something you really need to know in this game when you get up to the point that you're using bronze weapons is that from bronze onwards, weapons have a secondary attack. The game doesn't really tell you this outright, but if you press middle mouse, you will do a second, usually heavy attack. Secondary attacks take a little bit of time for your character to wind up, so they do leave you a little vulnerable, but they usually deal more damage. Also, oftentimes, secondary attacks can cause an enemy to get instantly staggered, and therefore following up with a regular left click primary attack, you can end up doing a crit. And with certain enemies like the troll, the secondary attack with specific weapons, in this case the pole arm, will actually cause him to be staggered even. And being able to instantly stagger a troll can be a great way to escape, deal some extra damage, or even just buy you a little more time to follow up with fire arrows or whatever your weapon of choice may be. Technically, the game does show you how to do secondary attacks. It's just in really small writing in the button prompts in the bottom right. So if you want to know if your weapon has a secondary attack, just check the bottom right and look for the button prompt. Alright guys, that's going to about do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I am streaming this game every day on Twitch right now at twitch.tv/NickRawcliffe, so feel free to come by and say hello. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. Let me know what you thought of this video. Subscribe for future content. Until next time, have a good one.